Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back to the windswept steppes of the 13th century vast open plains, where grass ripples like waves beneath a purple dawn, and the scent of smoke and boiled mutton hangs heavy in the air. You're in a yurt, a round felt-walled tent wrapped in a thick robe, blinking at the cold as sunlight seeps in through a smoke hole. Outside, horses snort impatiently, their breath steaming in the morning chill. A low horn groans in the distance. It's not for war, not this time. It's a signal that a message is about to be carried across 1,000 miles of unforgiving terrain, at speeds you'd associate more with airmail than with the year 1240. You stretch still stiff from the floor mat and realize this isn't just any day. You're about to become part of the fastest postal system the world had seen, up to that point, and possibly since. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and don't forget to post where you're listening from, and what time it is helps me imagine who's out there drifting off with me. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle out of the yurt, and the cold air hits you full in the face. The horses are already saddled. A man with a weathered face, thick braids, and a sheepskin cloak squints at you. He jerks his chin toward the saddlebag waiting on the wooden post beside you. You reach for it. And whoa, it's heavier than you expected. Inside scrolls, tokens, and a piece of something soft and gleaming. Silk. You're not just a traveler anymore. You're a courier, whether you like it or not. Your horse is fast. Too fast. You're barely staying in the saddle, as the plains blur beneath you, the smell of sagebrush and trampled grass in your nose. There are no road signs. No GPS, but your guide, a lean, hawk-eyed woman on a chestnut mare, doesn't hesitate. Follow the yam line, she shouts above the wind. You're too embarrassed to admit you don't know what that means. The yam, that's what the Mongols called it. A postal relay system that stretched across the known world, from Beijing to the Black Sea. Think Pony Express on 10 shots of espresso. Horses were posted every 25 to 30 miles, and couriers would ride them hard, swap mounts, and keep moving sometimes, covering up to 200 miles in a single day. You're barely at 12. But here's the kicker, you humble traveler have a garage, that shiny silk square with a bronze seal you found earlier. That's your imperial passport. It grants you access to horses, shelter, food, and basically royal treatment at every station along the route. Not bad for someone who still can't find north without moss. You pass another rider. He nods. He's got the same seal stitched to his coat. There's no chatting, though, just the sound of hooves wind, and the occasional low hum of throat singing from some distant campfire. You're starting to get it. This isn't a vacation. It's infrastructure on horseback. It's a moving artery of the empire. And it's not just official messages. Historians still argue whether the yam was used for common correspondence or only imperial business, but evidence points to a bit of both. Military orders, tax records, even birthday greetings from the Khan himself. Anything that needed moving fast traveled by yam. Suddenly the wind shifts, and you get a noseful of something that smells like socks and vengeance. You've arrived at your first relay station. It's a cluster of jurors around a smoking fire pit. Men are tending horses, boiling meat, and yelling in at least 3 different languages. You dismount, hand over your garage, and instantly someone swaps your horse for a fresh one, thrusts a bowl of salty milk tea into your hand, and refills your saddlebags. It's weirdly efficient, like suspiciously so. You half expect a guy with a clipboard to appear and ask how you'd rate your experience on a scale of 1 to 10. But no clipboard. Just a smiling woman who pats your shoulder and says, "Ride fast sleep when you're dead." That seems to be the vibe here. These people do not mess around. You start to notice things the way the relay horses are fed special grain to keep them high energy, how the couriers wear bells, so they're heard even in the fog, how even the dogs at these posts seem to know which saddlebag not to sniff. You're witnessing a machine built not from metal and wires, but from tradition, necessity, and raw horsepower. Now here's the wild part. None of this is accidental. Genghis Khan. Yes, that guy designed this whole setup. Or at least he gave the order. He realized early on that speed meant survival. Speed meant news of a rebellion reached him before the rebellion itself. It meant commanders could coordinate across impossible distances. It meant silk, from China, could reach traders in Persia before the fashion trend expired. And while you're chewing on that, and on something chewy you pray is goat, you realize this postal system isn't just for letters. It's the internet of its time. It connects cities. It controls armies. It whispers gossip between khans. And you're now one tiny pixel in the broadband connection of a continent. Still, it's not all majestic sunsets and flowing steppe winds. You narrowly avoid being trampled by a supply wagon hurtling toward the next station. You get peed on by your own horse. And at night, when the fire dies low and the stars feel sharp enough to cut you, you wonder just how many people had to ride themselves into the dirt for the sake of Mongol efficiency. You lie back on your saddle eyes, flicking between constellations and thoughts of home. You were just a visitor. Now you're part of the system, and it's only just begun. The night air clings to your skin like thin ice as you mount your next horse just before dawn. You barely slept. Your arms ache, your back protests, and your legs feel like cooked noodles. But there's no time for comfort, not if you're going to keep pace with the yam. The postal system of the Mongol Empire doesn't slow down for anyone, least of all you. This new mount is younger, twitchier. The moment you nudge it forward, it bolts like a firework with legs. Your teeth rattle your hat, nearly flies off, and your left foot keeps threatening to slide out of the stirrup. You've got no choice but to hold on and try not to look terrified. Because you're not just riding, you're racing time itself. See, the yam relied on speed. Relentless, punishing, sleep-deprived speed. Riders like you, well better trained than you could cover staggering distances in a day. One source claims messengers could reach 200 to 250 miles per day, using fresh horses at each station. Compare that to the average medieval European courier, who might plod along at a mere 20 miles daily. That's like comparing a Lamborghini to a shopping cart with one squeaky wheel. You grip the reins tighter as the planes blur past. Trees whip by like ghosts. Small animals scatter. You fly past another relay station and catch a glimpse of a child waving a long pole with flags your signal to switch horses again if needed. But you don't stop. Not yet. You're in the zone, even if your tailbone begs for mercy. The Mongol postal riders were known as örtöö, and they were both respected and feared. The system worked because it was organized, brutal, and deeply embedded in the Empire's DNA. Stations were placed roughly every 25 to 40 kilometers, and at each one, a fresh horse and basic supplies awaited. If you had a garige, that magic passport, you could access it all. If you didn't, well, good luck. You'd be treated like a cranky goat in a lion cage. You finally slow near a rocky outcrop. The next station rises ahead, looking like a cluster of giant mushrooms sprouting from the earth. Smoke curls from chimneys. You dismount, staggering like you've had too much fermented mare's milk, which, to be fair, they offer you anyway. This station is quieter, more military. The relay master inspects your garage like a customs officer. He grunts in approval and stamps a little square of parchment with a carved wooden seal. You didn't even know that was part of the process. It isn't technically. Historians still argue whether each station kept formal records or just operated on trust and memory. The answer probably lies somewhere in between a healthy mix of protocol and don't ask questions. Inside a fresh horse is already being prepped. While you wait, you glance at a worn map painted directly onto the wall. It looks like a spider's web stretched over Asia routes crisscrossing from Karakorum to Kiev, from Baghdad to Beijing. All of it tied together by the hoofbeats of messengers like you. You down your cup of salty tea and peek at the saddlebag again. There's something strange among the scrolls, a small polished box no bigger than a hand. It's sealed with red wax and etched with a symbol that looks like a bird with too many wings. You raise your eyebrow, but the station keeper just shrugs. Some messages fly faster than others, he mutters cryptically. And that's when you realize this system doesn't just move letters. It moves people, orders, trade, spies, secrets. And those secrets ride fast. You hop back onto your next horse, this one softer in the gait thankfully, and continue your sprint across the endless green. As you ride, your mind starts to drift. You imagine what kind of bureaucracy kept all of this functioning, who fed the horses, who enforced the rules, who cleaned up when someone vomited all over their saddle. There were in fact thousands of people involved. Relay station workers, herders, smiths, cooks, scouts. The Mongol state paid these people in exemptions from taxes or military service, though sometimes they weren't thrilled about it. Some stations became semi-permanent villages, especially along high-traffic routes. Others remained solitary specks in the wilderness, manned by families who probably grew very tired of yak stew. Suddenly, a hawk cries overhead. You glance up and nearly miss the narrow bridge ahead. Your horse doesn't, he leaps it, you shriek, and your scrolls nearly fly out of your bag. Once you recover your breath, you laugh. That wild, unhinged laugh of someone who realizes they're in over their head, but loving every second of it. The Mongol relay wasn't all gallop and glory, of course. Accidents happened. Horses collapsed. Riders fell asleep mid-stride and woke up in ditches. You spot a broken spearhead along the roadside, half buried in grass. Maybe it belonged to a courier who didn't make it. Or maybe it's just left over from one of the many Mongol skirmishes. Hard to say. Either way, it reminds you this system wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed for control. Because that's the secret undercurrent here. Every hoofbeat, every station, every garage, they're not just about messages. They're about managing an empire that stretched across continents. From the frozen rivers of Russia to the scorching deserts of Persia, the yam made the vastness feel manageable, tangible, governable. And you jittery courier that you are now part of that control. Every time you pass another rider, every time your horse snorts and gallops harder, you're reinforcing the reach of the cons. You're part of their web. You slow as another station looms on the horizon, smoke curling from its chimneys, figures moving like shadows beneath the morning sun. You've made it through another stretch. Your knees wobble as you dismount your saddle sores, sing in protest. And yet there's something weirdly satisfying about it, like you've cracked open a corner of history and found it pulsing alive, and more organized than your local DMV. As you hand off the box with the winged bird seal, the station keeper bows solemnly. "Good speed," he says. You nod back already, thinking of the next leg, because the yam doesn't stop. It doesn't wait. It only gallops forward. And so do you. The new horse breathes like a bellows beneath you, muscular, lean, and clearly not interested in trotting politely. The moment your legs settle in the stirrups, it surges forward, sending a fresh jolt through your spine. You are once again hurtling through the steppe, chasing a message you haven't read, on a mission you don't entirely understand, armed with nothing but a wax-sealed pouch and a piece of silk that glows faintly in the sun. That silk is not just decorative. It's your garage, the imperial passport. Without it, you're just another dusty traveler likely to be turned away from the next station or worse. With it, doors open, horses appear, bowls of steaming meat you didn't order are shoved into your hands. You've become a moving node in the Empire's nervous system. You check your gorege again as you ride. It's embroidered with gold thread in looping elegant script. The small bronze tablet dangling from it is heavier than it looks, etched with Mongolian characters and a strange circular stamp. You're told it proves that you travel on the business of the Khan. If that doesn't sound like something you want to misuse, you clearly haven't seen the penalty for forgery here. And yes, people did try to fake these things. The garage was such a powerful tool that it practically guaranteed free passage, food shelter, and political immunity, which naturally made it extremely tempting to copy. Historians still argue whether the Mongol Empire had a formal method for tracking each garage, or whether local relay stations used memory judgment and good old-fashioned suspicion. Either way, you've been lucky so far. You spot a low stone marker on the side of the path, half covered in moss, nearly missed it. That's your checkpoint. You turn slightly north toward a wooden arch in the distance. 2 soldiers stand there, arms crossed. They do not wave. They do not smile. But when you flash the garage, they grunt and move aside, as if a mystical force has parted the veil of bureaucracy. You pass through and ride into the station compound, a more fortified outpost this time, not just yurts and herders, but a perimeter wall, a signal tower, and a stable full of horses so pristine they might have been shampooed this morning. This is no ordinary yam station. This is a key node on the central route. A courier approaches you and holds out his hand. "Scroll," he asks plainly. You hesitate, unsure which one to hand over. You rifle through your bag and pull out a scroll bound with red ribbon. He nods, takes it carefully, and places it in a box, already half full of others. They're stacked by color blue, red, gold. It occurs to you that the postal system may be even more organized than you imagined. The courier grins. "Going west?" he asks. You nod. He chuckles. "Good luck. Rain's coming, and the roads are worse past the salt flats. Rain, roads, mud." You sigh internally, but the gear they offer you at this station lifts your spirits a waterproof cloak, made of oiled leather, fresh boots, and oh, sweet mercy, a padded saddle blanket. You climb aboard your new ride, a dark bay mare, with clever eyes, and continue. The landscape is changing. Grass thins, the air grows drier, and the sky becomes an open bowl of pale blue. You ride under it like a bead sliding across glass. As you gallop, the roll of the garage rattles around your brain. It wasn't just a fancy pass. It was a diplomatic weapon. Marco Polo himself reportedly traveled with one issued by Kublai Khan. It gave him the power to requisition anything he needed from subjects of the Empire. Bread, sure. A cart yours. A full resupply. And someone's prized ox, you bet. Historians still debate whether Gariges had strict limits or were left up to the traveler's honor. Judging by some of the chaos it caused, maybe a bit of both. You wonder if you're pushing your own luck. At the last station, they treated you like royalty. At the next, the guards looked like they wanted to lose you in the woods. Still, the garage works. It's power on a string, but with great power, well, you know how that saying goes. As you ride, the silence of the steppe becomes a companion. You start to recognize rhythms the way the wind picks up in the afternoon, how the birds vanish before dusk, how even your horse seems to know which fork in the path leads to the next relay. You pass an old man leading a cart, pulled by 2 shaggy yaks. He sees your garage and tips his hat, wordlessly moving aside. You nod. It's a small interaction, but it reminds you how deeply the system is embedded in the culture. The Mongol postal routes weren't marked by road signs or fences. They were enforced by mutual understanding. And let's be honest, fear. Back in the capital, forgers of the garage were executed. The postal system was sacred, and the garage was its relic. Yet over time, even this system so strict, so revered, suffered. The more people who had access to a garage, the less special it became. It started as a privilege for officials and diplomats. Then merchants got it. Then their assistants. Then their cousins, their neighbors. And that one guy who swore he once delivered soup to a general. By the mid-14th century, the system began to fray under its own weight. Too many fake Gariges. Too many people claiming authority. But for now, in your journey, it still holds power. Doors still open. Meals still arrive. Horses still wait. The sun starts to dip as your next destination nears. You spot smoke again, a promising sign. But before you arrive, a figure on horseback blocks your path. She's tall, stern-faced, wrapped in layers of dark wool. She doesn't speak, just holds out her hand. You know what she wants. You present the gerej. She studies it for a long time. Then she nods, lets you pass, and rides off without a word. You exhale. Still valid, but the road's only getting stranger from here. The next station isn't what you expect. Gone are the fortified walls and regimented couriers in crisp sashes. This one looks cozy, almost domestic. A semicircle of Jer's smoke, curling lazily from chimneys, and a line of children playing with sticks, while a sleepy dog watches. You blink. Did you take a wrong turn into someone's backyard? But no, this is still Yam territory. It just happens to be a more homely stretch of it. And the moment you approach with your garage, everything activates like clockwork. A young man runs out from the largest yurt, takes one look at your weary horse, and whistles. A fresh mount is already being led out from the paddock before you've even dismounted. A pot of meat stew is bubbling nearby, and someone shoves a bowl into your hand without asking. You sit down on a low stool and let the warm, peppery broth work its way through your frozen limbs. This is one of the more typical stops, a relay station, or örtöö, just like before, but with a softer edge. Historians describe thousands of these sprinkled across the Mongol Empire, spaced roughly 1 day's ride apart. Some were simple yurts, others elaborate roadside inns with guest rooms and bathhouses. Yes, even couriers needed to wash off saddle stink. You've stumbled into one of the comfort hubs, which offered more than just efficiency. They offered relief, and they weren't all the same. Stations varied by region, terrain, and importance. Along the Silk Road routes, some stations became small commercial hubs themselves, where merchants could rest trade and swap gossip over bowls of Arag fermented mare's milk that, let's be honest, still smells like regret. You sip yours politely, trying not to gag. The host, an older woman with wind-burned cheeks and laugh lines deep enough to store soup smiles knowingly. First time she asks. You nod, cheeks puffed. She laughs and passes you something sweeter. Dried fruit soaked in honey. Much better. You glance around. Everything runs on routine. One person records who comes and goes, names horses taken direction. Another cleans tack and brushes the animals. One young woman's job seems to be ladling tea for the infinite stream of riders passing through. No one rushes yet. Everything moves swiftly. You're watching a machine disguised as a family. You sit beneath a leather awning, the afternoon sun casting golden rays across the fields. The Mongol genius wasn't in building monuments or marble palaces. It was in mastering movement. And these stations were their arteries, their post offices, their pit stops, their lifeline. And they weren't just Mongol. Many stations were manned by conquered peoples, Chinese, Persian, Slavic, Turkic. The empire's diversity wasn't just tolerated, it was weaponized. Skills were pooled, cultures blended. Relay food might include dumplings one stop and goat jerky the next. Languages changed with the elevation. You wonder, how was all this coordinated? Was there a central postal office in Karakoram with color-coded maps and pushpins? Historians still argue whether the system was managed through top-down central bureaucracy or local command chains, reinforced by loyalty and terror. Likely, it was both. Orders from the Khan ensured stations were stocked, staffed, and sacred. But station masters adapted to local challenges, flooded trails, snowstorms bored wolves. You couldn't standardize the step. You could only ride through it, teeth clenched and scarf pulled high. After your break, you're handed a fresh saddlebag bulkier than the last. It jingles when you lift it. Inside, bronze tokens, wax-sealed letters, and one small rolled piece of silk. When you ask what it is, the station master just shrugs. Not yours to know. Fair enough. You thank your hosts, mount your new steed, a pale gelding with kind eyes, and set off again. The terrain grows more varied now. You pass small groves of trees, hills that ripple like velvet, and once a crumbling stone watchtower manned by two sleepy soldiers. One of them gives you a lazy salute. You return it with a nod. By dusk, you reach another station, but this one is different. There's a large wooden arch at the entrance, ornately painted in deep red and black. The gears are arranged in perfect symmetry, and two flags flutter atop tall poles. One bears the classic Mongol tamga symbol. The other, a strange bird with arrows in its talons. You've seen it before on one of your scrolls. A guard approaches. He's better dressed than most, with an armored chestplate and fur-lined boots. He doesn't smile. Present your jerej. You do. He inspects it, then motions for two assistants to search your saddlebag. You stiffen, but say nothing. They pull out the silk roll study at whisper, then hand it back. Proceed, the guard says. You don't ask questions. You ride in, find a post to tie your horse, and make for the main jeer, where the firelight glows warm and the smell of roasted onions fills the air. You step inside and find furniture, actual furniture, cushions, wooden chairs, a table with a chessboard set up mid-game. A man in a long crimson robe looks up from the board and smiles faintly. Courier, he asks. You nod, swallowing a lump in your throat. He gestures to the chair opposite him. You look like you could use a proper seat. You sit, heart still racing. Around you, the sounds of a different kind of station buzz, less rustic, more elite. This is a high-tier hub, a regional relay headquarters, one where critical messages are sorted, military dispatches are rerouted, and decisions sometimes get made before they reach the Khan. The man pours you tea from a silver pot. "You made good time," he says. You blink, surprised. "You knew I was coming," he smirks. The wind brings word faster than wings. You don't know what that means, but you nod anyway, sipping the tea. It's spiced warm and finally free of fermented dairy. Progress. This station marks a turning point. You're not just part of the yam. Now you're inside its beating heart, and the messages you carry, they might just shift the fate of kingdoms. You wake at dawn on actual bedding, soft felt mats, layered thick draped with a fur blanket that still smells faintly of mountain goat and prestige. The elite station gave you a full night's sleep, a rare luxury on the yam. You even got a foot rub from an apprentice courier who clearly drew the short straw. You're not proud, but you're rested. The chess-playing man from the night before is already gone. So is your tea, and your horse. But waiting outside is a new Mount Tall Black, and clearly bred from something with lightning in its blood. A young boy hands you your gerej and a new pouch. "West," he says simply, and gestures toward the trail, carved into the morning mist. You don't ask what's in the pouch. You know better by now. This ride feels different, sharper. You're heading toward more populated lands, toward the edge of the empire, where cities dot the horizon, and the open steppe begins to yield to roads, markets, and political tension. The yam hums along these routes too, but the rhythm changes. It's less gallop, more glide, less wind in your face, more eyes on your back. It was all designed this way, by the one and only Genghis Khan. The man wasn't just a conqueror with a good horse and a bad temper. He was a logistics mastermind. The yam was one of his first and most brilliant acts of governance. A communication web stretched across more than 8,000 miles of empire, bound together not with stone walls or cathedrals, but with relay huts, fast horses, and 1,000 dusty boots. Genghis knew that speed wasn't a luxury. It was a weapon. In a world where rebellions could ignite like brush fires, he needed to know everything everywhere all the time. So he took a page from the Chinese relay systems and supercharged it. More stations, faster couriers, better incentives, ruthless penalties. You want to keep a Khan happy. Make sure his mail arrives on time. One popular tale describes how Genghis once had a message sent from his winter camp near Karakorum to his generals stationed thousands of kilometers away in Samarkand. The message allegedly arrived in under 2 weeks, an unimaginable feat in the 13th century. Even today, with commercial trucks and customs forms, you'd struggle to do that without at least one tragic delay involving a misplaced barcode. You wonder, as you ride beneath a sky smeared pink with dawn, what it must have felt like to be on the receiving end of that message. A sealed scroll from the Khan. You wouldn't read it aloud. You'd unroll it in private, maybe by firelight, maybe in terror. Because the yam wasn't just about postage. It was about power. It was the empire's arterial line, and it flowed in all directions. The system itself was brutally effective. Each station master was held accountable for the condition of the horses and the punctuality of the couriers. Horses weren't just replaced, they were rotated and ranked. Some were trained for endurance, others for speed, and some were gifted runners kept in reserve for high-priority missions. You suspect the one you're riding now is in that last category. She barely seems to touch the ground. As you pass over a wooden bridge spanning a narrow river, you spot a series of flags fluttering on the far bank, colors denoting a provincial border. A checkpoint looms ahead, but when the guards see your garige, they don't even stop you. They salute. They wave you through. The wind in your ears almost drowns out your own smug little grin. But not everything ran so smoothly. Historians still debate whether the system ever truly covered the full range of the Mongol Empire with equal efficiency. Some believe the western edges, places like Poland and Hungary, saw patchier service more reliant on local arrangements than true YAM infrastructure. Others argue that regional commanders built their own relay chains, modeled on the core system, but less centralized. Either way, the further west you go, the more improvisation you see. That's clear even now, as your next station appears on the horizon. It's less organized. Horses look underfed. One of the yurts is patched with a curtain instead of a felt door. The air smells faintly of mildew and boiled cabbage, but the relay master greets you respectfully, takes your pouch signs, something you don't understand, and gives you a chunk of dry cheese and a look that says good luck out there. That's enough. You ask for a fresh mount. He frowns, mutters something, then points to a horse tied near a fence. You approach the beast, and immediately realize this one's seen better days. Its ears are tattered. It's chewing on its own reins. Its name, apparently, is Shuga, which the stable boy tells you means one who bites. Great. You climb on anyway. The yam waits for no one. Your journey continues through hill country. The air is cooler now, laced with the sharp scent of juniper. The roads are rockier, but more defined. You pass small villages where children chase geese, and elders sit smoking long pipes. Some wave, some stare, some ignore you entirely. The Mongol postal riders were a strange presence in these lands, part official, part ghost. They didn't stay. They didn't gossip. They didn't shop for souvenirs. They arrived, switched horses, gulped soup, and vanished. You're starting to understand the loneliness of that life. The thrill, too, but definitely the loneliness. You reach another station by dusk, this one built into a cliffside partially sheltered from the wind. Inside, it's warmer than usual and filled with soft candlelight. You're served flatbread and a bowl of spicy lentils. The cook has a scar across one eye and sings off key to herself while she stirs the pot. It feels oddly comforting. You sleep beside the fire that night, surrounded by strangers who don't ask questions. And just before you drift off, you realize something strange. You haven't spoken more than 20 words all day. And somehow, you don't mind. You wake up to the smell of something burning. Not dramatically, just the gentle, familiar scent of slightly scorched bread. A man curses softly in a dialect you don't recognize. Somewhere behind you, a rooster crows with such enthusiasm you half suspect it's trying to launch its own courier service. You sit up groggy, every joint popping like firewood in a hearth. Outside, the wind carries frost across the cliff's edge, and your breath comes in clouds. The cook, the one-eyed woman from last night, hands you a hunk of the toasted flatbread, along with a knowing look that says, "Eat this, or collapse later." You eat it. It tastes like ash and defiance. Your horse is ready. Shuga again, still chewing on things he shouldn't, still glancing back at you like you owe him money. But he's the fastest mount at this outpost, and that's what matters. You sling your satchel over your shoulder, feel the weight of the scrolls and tokens shift against your ribs, and set off into the dawn. Within the hour, you're soaked. The rain starts without warning, thin at first, then thudding, then absolutely biblical. You tug your oiled cloak tighter, but it's no use. The water finds every gap, every seam, every grudge your gear holds against you. Shuga doesn't care. He gallops like he's part fish. This, you realize, is when the yam shows its teeth. Speed wasn't optional for Mongol couriers. It was a rule. Riders were expected to continue regardless of weather-terrain exhaustion or the occasional plague outbreak. Delays were unacceptable, because in this empire, speed meant survival. Literally. You crest a muddy hill and find yourself staring at the remnants of a collapsed bridge. A courier camped nearby waves you down and points to a detour. "Half a day extra," he mutters. "If your horse doesn't break a leg, you don't have a day. You barely have daylight." So you turn south, take the trail he warned about, and hope for the best. Along the way, the mud gets deeper. Trees lean across the trail like gossips, eavesdropping on your struggle. Your scrolls thump against your side. You keep riding. Messages didn't just travel fast, they had to. The Mongol military depended on split-second coordination across hundreds or even thousands of miles. Armies were spread out like fingers on a hand. If one moved late, it could mean the collapse of a campaign. Or worse, open rebellion. Genghis Khan understood this. His generals operated with frightening precision because his couriers rode like ghosts chased by war. Historians tell stories of commands being issued in the morning in Karakoram and reaching battalions in the Altai Mountains by nightfall. Think about that. Before phones, before trains, just horses and pain. And it wasn't just battle plans. Disaster reports, tax tallies, assassination warnings, and troop movements. All of it galloped through the yam like blood through veins. And if your courier failed to deliver, well, you probably wouldn't fail twice. Punishments for delays or lost messages ranged from public flogging to execution, depending on the importance of what you'd misplaced. There are rumors, no one's quite sure, if they're true, of riders who were sewn into empty saddles and paraded through towns as a warning. This is what happens when the mail is late. You try not to think about that, as your horse nearly face plants into a puddle. Still, the relay system had backup plans. Couriers traveled in pairs during risky seasons, and certain high-priority messages were duplicated, carried along separate routes. The Mongols may have been terrifying, but they weren't stupid. They built in redundancies. You've already passed 3 riders today, going the opposite direction, each with their own direge, their own secrets. At the next relay, you're soaked to the bone and look like something a hawk would hesitate to eat. But the keeper simply takes one look at your bronze seal nods and hands you a wool blanket. Your new horse is already waiting slim white and stamping impatiently. You're carrying the eagle, the relay master murmurs as you mount. You glance down. The pouch he nods. That seal. It's only used when the Khan wants someone to disappear. You don't ask questions. You ride as the rain lightens and the sky bruises with twilight. You realize that even if you never know the content of your dispatches, you feel their urgency. They hum with tension. Some of them smell faintly of wax and rose oil, maybe from court. Others are sealed with metal wires or knots you don't recognize. Every courier carried more than messages. They carried the heartbeat of the Empire. And the Empire was always thudding, always demanding. You cross a shallow river where stepping stones have been placed with just enough care to imply someone risked their life doing it. On the other bank, you dismount and lead your horse uphill. The road is too steep. Your thighs scream. But then light. Firelight. Another station. Inside, you warm your hands over a small brazier, while a child dries your cloak with shaking hands. The station keeper hands you a bowl of barley stew and says nothing. Everyone here looks tired. Riders come and go, ghosts slipping between tent flaps and rain sheets. One woman you recognize from earlier, sleek braid, narrow eyes scar on her left cheek. She nods to you. No words. You sit. You eat. You feel your hands again. But in your bones you know tomorrow will be faster, harder, because the Empire doesn't rest. The mail doesn't wait. And neither do you. Your hands are still stiff from the rain when you saddle up at dawn. The clouds have slunk away, leaving behind a sky so clear it almost feels sarcastic. The wind has stilled. Birds are chirping like nothing ever happened. Typical. Your horse today is younger, taut with energy. The moment you loosen the reins, she bursts forward like a bowstring let fly. You've barely had breakfast. You've definitely not had coffee. Not that Mongol relay stations do lattes. But you're moving. Again. This leg of the journey takes you through flatter country, where you can finally stop bracing for every twist in the trail. The rhythm settles in hoofbeats, wind your satchel thumping against your hip. For the first time in days, you start to wonder about the messages themselves. You unzip your pouch just enough to peek. Scrolls. That's expected. Tied with various cords, red, gold, black. Each color might mean something. Maybe a ranking system. Maybe just the preferred twine of the sender. One scroll smells faintly of cloves. Another is stiff with wax along the edge. But then you find something odd. A sliver of polished wood. Smooth. Carved on one side with symbols you can't decipher. Not Mongolian script. Not Chinese. Maybe Persian. It's short, too short for decoration. Maybe a token, or maybe a code. You slip it back in. The Mongols didn't rely solely on written letters. For messages that couldn't risk being read or intercepted, they used objects, encoded tokens, knotted strings, secret signifiers known only to sender and recipient. If the courier didn't understand what he was carrying, he couldn't betray it. Clever, if a little insulting, historians still debate how widespread these practices were. Some argue they were used mostly for military intelligence. Others think they were more common than surviving records suggest, especially given the multicultural tangle of the empire. With so many languages, symbols were the lingua franca of secrecy. You pass another courier headed east. He nods. No words exchanged. But something about his saddlebag looks familiar. A ribbon, maybe. Same gold twist as yours. A twin dispatch. A backup. A decoy. You'll never know. That's the thing about riding for the yam. You're essential, but you're also expendable. As you ride, the terrain opens. You see more than wilderness now fields. Cultivated land. Terraced hillsides. The smoke in the distance isn't from campfires. It's from kilns and forges. You're nearing a town. Maybe even a provincial capital. But the stations keep their rhythm. At the next stop, you don't even dismount before someone's pulling the pouch from your side. Another figure checks your garage, while a stable boy brings your next horse forward. It's like being in a Formula One pit stop, only everyone smells like yak butter, and nobody's wearing helmets. As they work, one of the handlers mutters, "Orders from the Blue Chamber." You blink. You've heard of that? The Blue Chamber was a section of the Khan's court reserved for internal affairs, political decisions, assassinations, spies. Not exactly bedtime story material, and now you're carrying something for them. You mount your new horse. This one's massive, taller than the last, broader in the chest. A war horse, probably. You don't ask why it was chosen. You just ride. The scrolls you carry rattle like bones. The Mongol Empire's communication system was more than a postal service. It was an instrument of rule. When you needed to issue laws, collect taxes, dispatch troops, or crush an uprising 2,000 miles away, you needed certainty. You needed speed. And you needed discretion. That's why the yam mattered. It wasn't just faster than anything else on Earth at the time, it was also secure. Most messages weren't duplicated unless absolutely necessary. And every courier, even you, had to be vetted. Relay masters reported suspicious riders. Secret checkpoints verified seals. One mistake, and you'd find yourself explaining things to someone who didn't believe in second chances. You ride harder. The road is smooth, now packed from use. Traders, soldiers, even farmers step aside as you approach. Some recognize your garage and avert their eyes. Others glance longingly at your fresh horse and clearly wonder how you landed the job. Don't be flattered. They're not admiring you. They're terrified of what might be in your bag. By midday, you reach another station, this one larger, fortified, bustling. There are guards at the gates, traders unloading goods, and officials seated on rugs, with ink-stained fingers, and scrolls piled high. A small, square stone marker near the entrance reads Post 117, Gate to the Western Line. You're officially shifting routes. The Western Line, towards Central Asia, Persia, eventually into Europe. This is where the system stretches itself thin, relying on relay partners in non-Mongol territories, adapting to cultures and road conditions that don't follow the same rules. The postal pouch is swapped. You're handed a heavier one, sealed with cords you've never seen. The seal looks like a sun with twin arrows. One of the station officials examines your garage more closely, this time turning it over, brushing it for forgeries. After a long pause, he nods. You're cleared. Then he adds, Ride fast. They're expecting this by dusk. Dusk. You barely stop yourself from laughing. That's hours away. And judging by the map you glimpse behind him, a long, rough road lies between here and there. But you nod. Tighten your belt, and mount the warhorse, because that's what you do. You ride like the wind is chasing you, and it kind of is. The sky above the Western Line is smeared with smoke-gray streaks, the kind that promise either a fire somewhere in the distance or an oncoming dust storm. Your horse doesn't care. She charges forward, hooves pounding the packed dirt so fiercely it feels like thunder from your own ribs outward. The Western Line. It's a different beast. Less polished, less patrolled. The terrain here shifts quickly from flat farmlands to scraggly foothills to sudden rocky gulches that seem intent on snapping ankles, horse or human. The relay stations grow further apart. The trails are more ambiguous, and the signs, when they exist, are carved into rocks or painted on hides strung between trees. You glance at your saddlebag again. The sun arrow seal on the new pouch is intact. The weight of it presses against your side like a dare. You remember what the man at the station said by dusk. Right, you urge the horse faster, though your thighs are now in open rebellion. She responds with a snort and digs in harder. You realize something unsettling she wants to run. This isn't just a fresh horse. It's a trained courier mount, the kind they save for important legs, the kind that knows exactly how far, how fast, and how little mercy is involved. There are reasons why this system worked. One of them is horses like this. Another, relay discipline. At the next stop, the handler doesn't even speak. He tosses you a pouch of dried meat, refills your water skin, and throws open the gate. Your horse is swapped with such practiced speed you barely register it. This one is smaller, but lean all tendon and focus. You're waved on. No signature, no chat. Just a nod, and the road. You can feel the pressure mounting. This message, whatever it is traveling fast. Too fast. Most messages move with urgency, but this one feels orchestrated, like it's being relayed with extra hands along the way. You begin to suspect you're one of several, a daisy chain of couriers darting across the empire, like neurons firing in a single imperial brain. You remember a story told around a smoky relay fire 2 nights back. A tale about a high-ranking general whose betrayal was discovered via one such message. The missive traveled across the steppe in a matter of days, arriving just in time to prevent a siege. The general was executed. His officers were replaced. The courier, according to legend, was awarded a personal estate and 6 goats. You hope your message is less life and death, but deep down you doubt it. The landscape continues to shift. You pass fields of tall, dry grass, broken by ancient trees that seem older than time. Then suddenly a road, an actual paved road. Stones fitted so tightly together, you barely feel the horse's hooves strike them. This was once a trade route, maybe even part of the Silk Road itself, and it still lives. Because you're riding it. It's here that the genius of the Mongol postal system really hits you. It didn't just connect places, it linked worlds. From the forests of Siberia to the markets of Baghdad, from the mountains of Tibet to the vineyards of Georgia, east to west, north to south. No empire in history had ever moved this fast or communicated this widely. Not the Romans, not the Persians. The Mongols outpaced them all, and they did it with saddles, not scrolls. Historians still debate whether the route you're riding now, this jagged thread of stone and dust, was part of the original Yam, or a later adaptation by Kublai, or one of the regional Khans. Some believe it connected to the Ilkhanate in Persia. Others say it bypassed official routes entirely, a secret corridor used for military intelligence. You don't know, but the pace says it all. At your next station, little more than a single yurt, tucked between boulders, you hand over your garage with trembling fingers. The station master frowns when he sees the pouch. He whistles. A young boy runs in with another. It's identical. A decoy. Your throat tightens. You're handed a fresh horse, another war mare this one, with scars across her shoulder, and pointed west again. No words, no questions, no time. The next part of your journey feels like falling. Downhill, fast, dangerous. The trail winds through narrow ridges and sharp passes. You brush against pine trees and pass cliffside shrines with tiny bells that jingle in the wind. Somewhere far below, a river roars. You have no idea what region you're in anymore. You just ride. And then suddenly people. A checkpoint. Not a station. This is different. Soldiers with distinctive red sashes block the trail. You present your garage, half expecting trouble. Instead, the commander steps forward, glances at the pouch, and waves his hand. He goes through, he says to the guards, and they part like silk curtains. Beyond a walled city, small but fortified. Banners fly above the gates. One is the sun arrow symbol again. You're waved in without inspection. Inside a stone relay post. Actual stone. Not a yurt, not a hut, but a permanent building with archways and guards, and a bell tower. You dismount. The pouch is taken. You're told nothing. And then just like that, it's over. No congratulations. No goat estate, just a bowl of stew and a dry blanket. You sit in a quiet corner of the post and watch as another courier rides out a fresh pouch at his side. Was it your message? Was it another hard to say? Because in the yam, you're not the story. You're the line that carries it. Word count, 1095. Awaiting continue. You said continue. ChatGPT said section 9. The stew is bland but warm. You finish it slowly, grateful for the lack of galloping involved. The walled city around you hums with quiet urgency. Guards shift positions. Traders shout from a nearby square, and somewhere above the bell tower marks the hour with a single solemn chime. You've delivered your pouch. Your horse is stabled. And for the first time in days, you're not expected to be anywhere else, for now. But don't relax just yet, because as you wander, the relay post's outer corridor stretching your saddle-worn legs and feeling your spine crack like old parchment, a quiet voice calls from the shadows. Courier. You turn. A man stands at the doorway, younger than you expected, dressed in the simple robes of a monk or a scholar maybe. No armor, no sword, but there's an edge to him like a blade hidden under silk. You came in on the Sunarrow route, he says, gesturing for you to follow. You hesitate. Then of course you follow. He leads you through a side hall, past rows of storage chests, and a room filled with maps. He opens one chest and pulls out another pouch. Oh no. You eye the thing like it might bite. Same garage, he says. Different pouch. You'll be heading south. Of course you will. You take it. It's lighter than the last, but wrapped in an unusual cloth, dark green, with stitched patterns that resemble falcon feathers. Something about it feels secret. The scholar doesn't explain, but he gives you something else, a wooden disc about the size of your palm. It's painted with a black circle and a jagged red line down the middle. Show this if you're stopped. They'll understand. Vague, comforting. You saddle up again, your poor legs protesting every motion, and head south out of the walled city. The terrain changes quickly. The trail narrows, weaving between hills, spotted with juniper and short grass. Occasionally, you pass stone pillars carved with writing too weathered to read. Then movement. A rider ahead. You approach cautiously. She sees your garage, slows her horse, and pulls up alongside you. She's older, with a fierce face and eyes like flint. Her garage is engraved differently, edged in silver. That's rare. And the pouch she carries almost identical to yours. Not quite, but close. You're running the shadow path, she says, as if you know what that means. She doesn't explain. Just offers a dry smile, turns west, and disappears over the hill. You ride on unsettled. The shadow path. It sounds like folklore, but you've heard the term before murmured at stations, half-joked over bowls of mare's milk. It's said to be a series of postal routes, used not just for high-priority messages, but for covert ones. Spies, political warnings, even assassins. Riders on the shadow path weren't just couriers, they were chess pieces. You want to believe that's all legend. But the more you ride, the more the signs line up. The trail winds through narrow rock corridors, and twice you're stopped, not by Mongol troops, but by unmarked patrols who examine your wooden disc, then wave you through without a word. It feels like checkpoints within checkpoints, layers within layers. The yam is not just a network, it's a living, breathing beast. And some parts of it have sharp teeth. You reach a station by nightfall. It's not listed on any map you've seen. Carved directly into the hillside, it looks like an abandoned shepherd's hut. but inside it's fully stocked horses, food, documents, even a narrow tunnel that vanishes into the rock. No one speaks. A rider exits the tunnel as you arrive, and you see him hand off a scroll, wrapped in red twine, just like the one in your pouch. The station keeper gives you your next horse without a word. This isn't a place for conversation. The silence speaks louder than orders. You mount again. Your new horse is silent too. No whinnies, no huffing breath. Just calm, methodical steps. You ride under the stars now, the moon washing the land in pale silver. The air smells like pine and secrets. And then footsteps. Not hooves. Human. You freeze. From the trees, two figures emerge. One holds up a hand showing the same red-line disc you carry. You do the same. They nod and vanish into the trees. You have no idea who they are, but apparently you're on the same team. Here's the thing. The yam was efficient, but it was also opaque. Riders were kept in the dark for a reason. Knowledge was power, and the fewer people who held it, the tighter the Empire's grip. Most messages were coded, encrypted, or hidden in plain sight. A love letter could be a death sentence. A merchant's receipt could signal a troop movement. Historians still argue whether the yam operated as a spy network or merely facilitated one. Evidence suggests both. Letters from UN dynasty officials reference couriers being instructed to observe and report along their routes. Some stations were known to house informants or carry messages that weren't meant to be delivered, only to reveal who tried to intercept them. You're just trying not to fall off your horse. By the time you reach the next station, your face is numb from wind, and your fingers ache. You hand over the green pouch. The station keeper inspects it, nods once, and tosses it into a box filled with others just like it. Dozens. You stare. You weren't the only courier carrying that message. You were one of many. Decoys, distractors, or all heading toward the same destination. You eat your stew. It's fishy. You don't ask why. You bed down in the corner of the station beside a pile of rope and a feral-looking cat that stares at you like it knows your secrets. And as you drift to sleep, one thought loops in your head. The yam wasn't just fast. It was everywhere, and it was always watching. You wake to the distinct feeling that someone's watching you, and not just the cat, who has now migrated to your chest and refuses to budge. A quiet shuffle of boots, the whisper of a leather flap pulled aside, the sound of someone trying very hard not to make sound at all. You sit up. A man in a hood stands at the edge of the room. He doesn't flinch when you spot him. Doesn't smile either. You're being reassigned, he says simply, and tosses something to you. You catch it anew, Jarej, but this one's different. Instead of the standard bronze, it's darker. Iron, maybe. It's heavier, engraved with a different symbol, a spear piercing through a crescent moon. You've never seen it before. The text wrapped around its edge is tighter, more intricate, and frankly, kind of ominous. The man says no more. He's already disappearing through the side exit. You glance down at your new pass, your fingers curling around the chill metal. This isn't a regular transfer. You don't even get a new scroll pouch this time. Just the pass. And a fresh horse already saddled outside, tied to a post. Like it knew this was coming before you did. You mount without a word. No one at the station sees you off. It's like you never arrived. You ride through the early fog heart thudding. The trail narrows fast into woods, then across barren stretches of cracked stone, where the road becomes little more than memory. You're not on the standard yam route anymore. You've been diverted. Why, here's where things start to fray. The Mongol postal system, for all its strength, had weaknesses, ones that became more apparent the more it was relied on. As the empire expanded, so too did the number of people authorized to use the yam, and with more users came more abuse. You pass a dilapidated relay hut late in the morning. It's empty. No horses. No watchmen. Just a few gnawed bones outside, and a shredded flag flapping against the wind. You don't stop. You don't need to. This station's been dead a long time. Historians agree the system began to decay by the mid-14th century. Why? Because the garage lost its exclusivity. Originally reserved for imperial officials and high-priority envoys, the passport system eventually expanded to include merchants, visiting scholars, diplomats, and sometimes, well, people who just knew the right person. Forgeries became common. Local lords started handing out jerezhis like festival snacks. A corrupt governor in Central Asia might sell one to a caravan in exchange for tribute. A well-connected merchant could bribe his way into yam privileges, guaranteeing fresh horses for his silk spices or whatever else needed moving. And as forgeries grew, so did suspicion. More checkpoints, more verifications, more delays, which of course defeats the whole point of a fast relay system. You crest a rise and spot a checkpoint ahead. 2 guards, 1 horse tied to a post, a cart beside them with something lumpy under a canvas. They don't wave, they just wait. You ride closer, holding up the iron jerej. One of them steps forward, lifts it, turns it in the sunlight. His eyes narrow. Then he nods, steps aside and mutters something to the other guard. You glance at the cart as you pass. Just for a moment. The lump under the canvas. It has boots. You ride faster. Corruption wasn't the only issue. As power decentralized across the empire's far reaches, various Khanates developed their own systems mirror versions of the yam that didn't always play well together. The Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, the Chagatai Khanate. Each had its own priorities, its own messengers, and often its own version of the garage, which meant confusion, delays, conflict. You arrive at a fork in the trail. No signposts, no markers, just a carved stone half buried in weeds. It's weathered, but you make out a scratched arrow, and beside it the symbol from your iron jerej, the spear and crescent. You turn that way. The trail leads to a ravine. A rope bridge stretches across it, swaying in the wind. You dismount, lead the horse across slowly boards, creaking under every hoofstep. Below, a stream gurgles lazily, as if it's entirely unaware that it might be the last thing you ever see. You make it across. Barely. And now the terrain feels wrong. Too quiet. Too controlled. There's a station here, but not a station. It's a house. Stone-walled. Slate roof. A tall flagpole stands out front with no flag. A man waits outside, arms folded. "Courier," he asks. You nod. Good. Get inside. Inside, it's shockingly luxurious rugs, brass lamps, wine on a low table, even painted walls. This isn't a relay post. It's a government villa. And you're not here by accident. 2 more men wait inside. One hands you a bundle of silk. It's tied with a strange cord, coarse and black wound in a complex knot. "Deliver this to Sarai," he says. "That's thousands of miles west. You'll transfer it through no fewer than 4 hands," he adds. "You don't need to know who. You don't need to know when." Great. Before you leave, they offer you a strange-looking saddlebag medal, reinforced with a lock. Then they hand you a slip of paper with a single glyph on it, one you've never seen before. The man says nothing. just pats your shoulder. You ride out head spinning. Welcome to the inner yam, the one built not for efficiency, but for control, for secrecy, for surveillance. It's no longer about letters and horses. It's about watching everyone, including you. You ride with a saddlebag that clinks every time your horse jolts. The lock on it digs into your thigh, a cold, persistent reminder that what you're carrying now is not merely a message. It's a vault, a secret with iron hinges. You haven't opened it. You can't. You're not even sure you want to. The air feels different on this stretch of the road. Drier, charged. You're not on any of the main yam routes anymore. No relay stations appear for hours. No patrols. Just hills rolling like waves of tired earth, scrubby trees, and birds that go silent as you pass. Eventually, you come across a stone arch, marking a roadside village. Not Mongol-built, you can tell. Probably Persian or Turkic in origin. The buildings here are squat and low-built for desert wind and sun. You dismount by a well. 3 children stop their game to stare at you. You nod politely. Then someone steps out of the shadows. A tall man, hooded familiar, only in the way his posture mirrors the others from the inner yam. He says one thing. You're expected. Of course you are. Inside a cramped building that smells of ink and old leather, you're given a set of new instructions, verbal only. You'll carry this as far as Merv, the man says. There you'll find a merchant named Balagchi. Give him the saddlebag. Say the word thorn. If he says plum, it's him. You almost laugh. It's so cloak and dagger you expect a secret handshake. But the man's face says don't joke. You leave with no new horse, no meal, and no map. Just a general direction, and a code word involving fruit. Welcome to the yam's black market cousin. Here's a truth rarely printed in textbooks. The Mongol relay system, so disciplined, so elegant on paper, was also wildly profitable. Once merchants were granted access to the yam, entire industries emerged around speeding up trade. Some nobles charged fees for priority paths. Some stations rented their fastest horses for the right coin. And some realized that messages weren't the only valuable things that could be moved quickly. You ride past a caravan on your way out of the village. The lead merchant nods at your garage and offers a wistful sigh. Wish I had one of those, he mutters. Would have sold half my camels for it last spring. You wonder if someone already did. Merchants quickly learned that having a garage, even a forged one, meant access to food, shelter, fresh horses, and above all speed. And when time is money, that meant fortune. Soon unofficial couriers began working the edges of the system. Shadow routes formed. Some relay station masters started double-dipping, serving both Empire and Enterprise. Smuggling became sleek. Espionage found a saddle. You're part of that now, apparently. At dusk, you arrive at a run-down outpost, definitely not official. A single tent, 2 tethered horses, and a sleepy man roasting something on a spit. He glances up as you approach, sees your saddlebag, and silently nods toward the larger horse. Fresh, he says. Takes the wind well. You swap mounts, drop a coin in his palm, and ride on without speaking. No stamps, no records, no logbook to sign. The system has gone rogue. Historians still argue whether this commercialization of the yam was a natural evolution or the beginning of its decay. Some say the Mongols encouraged trade-fueled couriers to fund station upkeep. Others argue that greed and decentralization corroded what once made the system great discipline, purpose, unity. They're both probably right. As you near Merv, the land flattens into pale gold plains, under a lavender sky. You spot 2 other riders in the distance, moving fast parallel to your path. You speed up. They do too. You slow down. So do they. Eventually, you take a sharp detour and lose them. You don't know if they were just travelers or someone else running the shadow circuit. But you don't take chances anymore. You arrive in Merv by moonrise. It's bustling even at this hour, lanterns swinging above stalls, dogs barking from rooftops, and the low hum of people trading stories goods, and maybe secrets. You find Balagchi's place easily enough a carpet shop, with more locks than windows. You step inside. The man at the back is folding cloth. You murmur Thorn. He doesn't look up. Plum, he replies. Your shoulders loosen a little. You hand over the saddlebag. He places it under the counter without so much as a glance. Then he hands you a fresh pouch. Lighter. Softer. For return trip, he says. South, then east. He doesn't ask your name. You don't ask his. You're offered no place to sleep, so you find a quiet alley and curl up near a stack of carpet rolls. They smell faintly of camel and cardamom. You pull your cloak tighter and close your eyes. And in the dream that follows, you're riding again. Only this time, you're carrying nothing. Just wind and memory. Morning creeps over Merv like a curtain, drawn slowly open lights slinking in around the edges, turning the sandy streets gold, making the dust sparkle, like it's been saving its best for sunrise. You're already awake, brushing sand out of your hair, with one hand while clutching your new pouch with the other. It's soft, fabric-wrapped, smaller than the others. Whatever's inside feels like folded parchment, maybe a letter, or maybe something much stranger. You don't wait around to find out. Your new route is south, then east. No horse provided this time, but you find a stable-keeper willing to rent you a shaggy, unimpressed-looking mare in exchange for a copper coin and half a dried fig. She glares at you the entire time you saddle her up. Her name, the stable boy says, is Milkshake. You do not ask why. Milkshake turns out to be slow but steady, which might be a metaphor for the yam itself now that you think about it. The system, once razor-fast and tightly controlled, has grown weirdly flexible or compromised, or both. Your route takes you away from the main yam arteries and into the forgotten roads, the alleyways of the Empire. These were never officially mapped. They don't have the infrastructure of the big relay lines, no stations every 25 miles, no restocks of fresh-trained horses. You're out here in the periphery. But these roads exist. They function. And they're used quietly by people who don't necessarily want to be seen. And that's the thing, isn't it? The Mongol Empire's efficiency didn't just enable commerce and governance. It also enabled secrecy. Mobility is power, but it's also camouflage. In a system where riders can vanish into thousands of miles of connected outposts, how do you track anything? You pass a small camp mid-morning. Traders from Samarkand judging by their clothes. One of them glances at your gerej and nods in that way that says, "Ah, you're one of those." He offers you dried apricots. You trade for dates. No one asks any questions, because on the yam, everyone learns early curiosity kills more than cats. You stop briefly at a half-abandoned station. The sign is broken. The horses look wild. The only person there is a woman with hair down to her waist, sharpening a curved blade on a flat rock. She doesn't speak, but when you hold up your pouch, she nods and tosses you a wrapped bundle of travel bread and a water skin. That's all the interaction you get, and it's all you need. Later, as Milkshake plods up a hill toward a tree-shaded ridge, you pull out the pouch just enough to peek. Inside 3 thin letters. Not scrolls. Letters. One sealed with beeswax, one with a carved bone clasp, and one that's simply folded and tied with a red string. They feel personal, intimate, not military orders, not edicts, just words meant for someone far away. And yet they're being moved by the same network that once carried Genghis Khan's war plans. You think about that. Historians often reduce the yam to pure logistics, a miracle of relay stations and horse breeding. But they forget the human current flowing through it. Not just messages, but people, emotions, secrets, pleas, desires, sometimes rebellion. And in a system this vast, those human things slipped in between the cracks. You reach another unofficial stop by evening, a family-run hut with 2 GR tents beside it, and an elderly man spinning yarn beside a fire. He watches you approach like someone watching the weather change. Not surprised, just mildly inconvenienced. You present the pouch. He raises an eyebrow. Not from this line, he says. But I'll see it moved. You hesitate. You'll pass it on. He nods. Next rider comes through at moonrise. Friend of a friend. You leave the pouch with him. There's no paper trail. No confirmation. But something about his voice, the way he folds the letters into a silk cloth, before stashing them inside his coat, makes you believe him. That's how the side roads of the yam work. On trust and reputation, and the quiet knowledge that the whole empire is always listening. After dinner, fermented grain cakes, and something that tastes vaguely of fish, you lie beneath a tree and gaze at the stars. You hear distant hoofbeats later. You sit up just enough to glimpse a rider stop at the firelight, hand something off to the old man, and disappear again. Your pouch is gone now, replaced by a fresh one, different cord, slightly heavier. Of course. You saddle Milkshake again, who seems annoyed at having to move more than 10 feet at night. You whisper apologies and guide her east toward the next cluster of lights in the distance. Here's the truth. Nobody writes in the royal scrolls. The Mongol Empire's greatest invention wasn't just conquest. It was connectivity. An invisible web stretched across 2 continents tighter and faster than anything the world had known. It carried emperors' orders, merchants' goods, spies' secrets, lovers' letters, and now, you. You bouncing along on a grouchy mare named Milkshake. Somewhere ahead is another station, another switch, another pouch. And though you're exhausted, hungry, and sore, in ways that should be studied by monks, you realize something else. You never want to stop riding, because in this tangled empire, riding means you exist. You wake with a sore back and a mouth full of dust. The tree you slept under did little to block the early morning breeze, and Milkshake has wandered off just far enough to make you chase her with one boot half on. She eyes you with contempt as you cinch the saddle, as if she's above this whole glorified courier business. Maybe she is. You're back on the move before the sun clears the hills. The new pouch you received in the night feels ominous, heavier. It doesn't clink or rustle. It just sits there dragging your mind with it. You pass fewer people now. The road, if it can be called that, is little more than a dirt groove winding between salt flats and craggy scrubland. The wind tastes metallic. Occasionally, you see signs that this was once a thriving yam route. A sun-bleached signpost with no writing left a collapsed station surrounded by weeds, an ancient stone trough cracked in half. This was once a lifeline. Now it's a relic, You're entering what was once the southern artery, a major line of the postal system, stretching from the core Mongol territory into Persia and the Arabian reaches. Once it had hundreds of active stations. Now, you're lucky if you find one with a roof. And yet you ride on. At midday, you stop at a station that's just a lean-to pressed against a cliff. A single man sits cross-legged outside, whittling a stick into a vaguely terrifying shape. When he sees your garage, he stands, slowly walks into the lean-to, and returns with a cup of sour yogurt and a blanket you didn't ask for. No words, just that eerie yam hospitality. You eat, you stretch, and you ride again. By now, the yam is changing under your feet. You can feel it. There's less formality, more improvisation. You pass a pair of couriers riding tandem, one of them clearly new, trying to stay upright, while the other shouts instructions over the wind. Their horses are mismatched, their gear a patchwork of borrowed leather and luck. This is the yam in decline. Historians often disagree on when the system truly began to unravel. Some say it was during the Black Death, when population loss crippled the relay workforce. Others point to the disintegration of centralized power, when the empire fractured into rival khanats, each with their own agendas, priorities, and interpretations of what the yam should be. And others still blame the most mundane culprit of all overuse: too many riders, too many unofficial stops, too many merchants, diplomats, spies, smugglers, and thrill-seekers leaning on the infrastructure like it was invincible. Eventually, the burden cracked the system. You're riding through that crack now. At the next outpost, you find it fully abandoned. Doors flapping, the post sign toppled, horses long gone. But inside you see remnants of what once was ledgers curled with age, a saddle hanging from a rusted peg, and on the wall a drawing. Crude. Charcoal. It shows a relay rider on a galloping horse, scroll in hand, mouth open mid-yell. Someone scrawled a word in Persian below it. You don't know what it means, but it looks like the kind of word said with grit, teeth, and pride. You press on. The landscape grows harsher. Sandier. You pass the bones of something large, a camel maybe, a tumble of collapsed wagons not far off. You begin to see not just the system's decay, but its ghosts. Hints of roads that once sang with hooves, stations that once bustled with chatter and soup pots and scrolls by the hundred. And now, silence. You sleep that night in a dried riverbed. No stations nearby, no lights, just stars and the sound of your own heartbeat. It occurs to you, as you stare up into the quiet vastness, that this postal network, this spinning wheel of horses and messengers, once bound the largest contiguous empire in history. It made the world smaller. It gave an emperor the power to send his voice across the mountains. It let a merchant in Bukhara know about an uprising in Delhi in days, not months. And now it's crumbling, still functioning but just barely, and maybe that's what makes it feel so real. Not the grandeur, not the ambition, but the unraveling, the creak in the saddle, the half-missing station, the way a lone rider like you, scuffed and wind-chapped and riding a horse named Milkshake, can still carry a whisper across the bones of an empire. You wake before dawn, pouch still tied to your belt hands, stiff eyes gritty. You mount. You ride. Because even in decline, the yam still moves, and you move with it. You've lost track of the days now. There are no calendars out here, no bells to mark the hour, just the sun dragging itself from east to west, and you chasing the horizon, like a ghost with a deadline. Your skin is dusted with road, your hands permanently curled from holding reins. and Milkshake, bless her ornery heart, has started responding to your muttering with a flick of her ear. You suspect you're talking to yourself more than usual. It's not entirely clear where you are anymore. Somewhere west, but not far enough to smell the sea. Somewhere once important, there are ruins scattered across the hills, stone platforms half swallowed by sand-broken columns, littering the trail like forgotten punctuation. You pause by a crumbling stone post, barely taller than your hip, its top etched with Mongol script, so weathered it might as well be tree bark. You brush the surface with your sleeve. Just enough remains to make out a direction marker to Tabriz. You're in the old heartlands of the Ilkhanate now, a splinter state of the Mongol Empire. It stretched across Persia and into the Caucasus. And it borrowed the yam with some creative edits. Different roots, different rules, different loyalties. This was one of the first cracks in the Mongol monolith. As local khans grew more autonomous, they began reshaping the empire's infrastructure to suit their own ambitions. What was once a seamless relay became a regional contest of influence. Stations got renamed, rules rewritten, messages intercepted, trust broke down. You see signs of it all around you. Relay stations converted into watchposts, pouches carried with duplicate seals, insurance against local forgers, horses branded not with the imperial tamga, but with the sigils of minor lords. The network survived, but it became patchwork, and that's where the real unraveling began. You stop at a relay station still barely clinging to form. The yard is fenced with scrap wood. The gate has no latch. Inside, a man with clouded eyes sits beside a heap of mailbags, sorting them by touch. He hears your approach and says without looking, "Stamp it," then "Stove it." You have no idea what that means, so you quietly leave your pouch on the table and nod, as if this is completely normal. It probably is. When you ask for a mount, a teenager points toward a mule. You point at Milkshake instead. "Her," the boy says, incredulous. "She's old." You shrug. She knows the way. Milkshake huffs with visible pride. As you ride, you begin to understand what the yam has become. Not a state-run system. Not anymore. Not fully. It's something messier, wilder, a stitched-together quilt of human ingenuity and half-remembered rules. Relay masters adapting to collapsed economies. Writers who've turned freelance. Regional lords running parallel couriers under the same brand. And still, somehow it works. Just barely. You pass a caravan headed in the opposite direction. A merchant riding a camel slows to match your pace and nods toward your garage. "Original?" he asks. You nod. He whistles. "They don't make those anymore. Yours must be, 10 years old? Maybe more. You didn't realize it had become a collector's item." He waves you on. "Watch out ahead. The next pass belongs to House Collage now. They don't care for old stamps." "Great." You thank him and ride on now fully paranoid. And sure enough, as the trail climbs into a narrow canyon, you spot guards, 3 of them wearing mismatched armor and eyeing every traveler like a threat. One steps forward, hand outstretched. Pouch. You hesitate. Now. You hand it over. He weighs it, sniffs it, hands it back, then points to your garage. "This is old." "I'm old," you reply deadpan. He doesn't laugh. He steps aside. You ride on heart pounding. These checkpoints are the new norm. Without a unified empire, power now sits in whoever claims the yam station near them. Some guard it. Some exploit it. Some burn it to the ground and replace it with their own version, complete with taxes and new rules. Historians still argue whether this transformation was inevitable. Some say the yam lasted longer than it had any right to. Others believe it could have been saved had there been a single unifying force after Kublai Khan's death. Instead, there were fractured courts competing heirs, and a lot of very confused horses. You, meanwhile, are still riding, and you begin to feel the layers. Every pouch you carry now feels heavier with meaning, not just because of what's inside, but because of what it represents. You're delivering something across the ruins of order, across borders that shift with the wind, through forests where the signs point in 3 directions, and none of them are right. But you're still moving. The yam hasn't died. It's just mutated, adapted. At the next station, a mud brick outpost near a river, you find a pile of discarded jerejis, dozens of them rusting in the corner like broken coins, old tokens, decommissioned, forgotten. You pick one up. It bears the mark of a Kanadi that no longer exists, and still for a moment it gleams in the fading light. That night, you sleep beside the river. Milkshake snores. The wind smells like rain. And as you close your eyes, you realize something strange. Even now, after all the breakdowns, the betrayals, the detours and the decay, you believe in the system. Because something somewhere is still holding it together. And tomorrow, you'll ride again. You wake with your face stuck to a saddle blanket and the sound of frogs in your ears. Rain fell overnight, just enough to make the earth sticky, and the air taste like wet leaves. Milkshake is still asleep on her side, like a sprawled rug. You take a moment to envy her. Today is your last leg. You feel it. The pouch in your possession now is small, soft, sealed in beeswax and linen. No metal tokens, no locked compartments, no codes burned into the fabric. Just a message as quiet and humble as a whisper. No one told you where it came from. No one told you what's inside. They only told you who to give it to. And even that's vague. The recipient's name is Arig. No title, no city, no profession. Just a first name and a direction northwest to a settlement between the bones of the 2 mountains. You have to laugh. Not even a proper address. Just coordinates by metaphor. That's the yam now, equal parts legend memory and blind faith. You set off slowly. Milkshake's joints crack audibly with every step. The road ahead is gentle, winding through meadows painted with spring wildflowers. A far cry from the harsh ridges and salt flats behind you. Here you start seeing things. Old things. Relay stones, flat round, half buried like sleeping shields, some carved with Mongol script, others marked with weathered icons, a falcon in flight, a galloping horse, a stylized arrow pointing nowhere. You pass the shell of a major station clearly once grand. Large courtyard, collapsed stables, a sun-bleached pole still flying the ghost of a flag. Someone has etched a message on one of the inner walls. We rode because the world needed to know. You rest your hand there just for a moment, and then ride on. The land grows more rugged, the flowers thin, the green fades to dust. 2 hills rise on the horizon, like sleeping giants, and nestled between them a village no bigger than a yurt circle. Smoke curls from chimneys. Chickens wander the road. This must be it. You tie Milkshake to a post gently and step into the village square. There's a market stall, a bread oven, a well, and half a dozen elders playing a game with stones. You ask the baker Arish. He nods, points to the edge of the village. A woman sits there on a mat, weaving reeds into baskets. She looks up as you approach, and for a moment you think she's going to wave you away. Then she sees the pouch. She stands, takes it gently. And that's it. No ceremony, no questions. She nods once and turns away, slipping the message into her robe like it's just another thread in the weave. You walk back to Milkshake, unclip your jerej, and look at it one last time. The metal is worn now, scuffed. It used to shine. You remember how it felt back at the beginning, like a ticket to something powerful, something grand. Now it feels like a memory. You tie it to the saddle horn, and you sit. You don't know what's next. Maybe another message. Maybe a new route. Maybe it's time to stop riding altogether. But for now, you rest. And as the wind moves through the grass, and the villagers shuffle around their quiet lives, you think about everything that moved with you across the empire. Letters, orders, whispers, fears, and all the things that didn't survive the stations gone quiet, the riders who vanished, the Canadies lost to time. And yet, something remains. A system held together, not by force or wealth, but by belief. The belief that messages matter, that people far away still deserve to hear from people over here. That speed means survival. That silence sometimes is the most dangerous sound of all. You lie back against the saddlebag. The sky above you stretches blue and endless, and the road always goes on. The breeze has softened now. The road has quieted. Even the saddle sores somehow fade into the background. You feel the day exhale around you, the sun dipping lower behind the western ridge. And for the first time in a long while, no one expects you to move. No more messages to carry, no riders galloping past. Just stillness. Finally, stillness. You think of all the lives you passed, some you met for a heartbeat, others you watched from a distance. Station keepers boiling tea in tents that flapped like sails in the wind. Scouts asleep beside their horses. Riders bent low in the storm, clutching scrolls like lifelines. People whose names you never knew, but whose work kept the world turning. And the horses, of course. The tired ones, the proud ones, the wild ones. Milkshake most of all. Stubborn, moody, dependable Milkshake, snoring now, her legs twitching in dream gallops. You close your eyes and hear the hoofbeats echoing through time. You picture the vast web of the yam, not as dusty ruins, but as a living thing. Still there beneath the grass, humming with memory, and as the night creeps in cool and blue and endless, you feel it carry you not forward, not back, but inward, toward rest. You've traveled far enough for one dream. The message has been delivered. The Empire sleeps now, and so should you.